The Seven of Cups is actually quite a simple card, at least on the face of it. It's known here on the Thoth card as debauch, of which is concerned with an excessive indulgence in the physical things of the world, often things of which we might associate with vices such as alcohol and drugs and things, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. Debauch is to poison the waters of light with an over-indulgence of something, even if it's something which isn't actually that bad if it was practiced, say, in moderation. And so over on the Rider-Waite card we can see that the observer is looking at these cups, and each one has an image in it, and it's something of which he may be manifesting or something of which he simply may be thinking of. In the physical world we've got snakes and dragons, all sorts of images to capture the imagination and to tempt, and they are all held in clouds, of which means that they may be somewhat dreamlike, and dreams are illusory and in flux. They're not real, we can't actually physically take hold of them and grab them. And so it's suggesting that these things in the physical world are illusions as well. They may serve a purpose for us, and yet one day they will get old and they will break down and be thought of no more. And on a deeper metaphysical level, it's energies and vibrations and things like that. They are illusions, especially when put against the great work of Hermeticism, which is of course what we're looking at through this journey through the universe. And so on the Tree of Life we can see something similar. It's Netzach, and yet in the Four Worlds idea it's Netzach in Briar. And so if we actually have a look at the cups themselves, they represent the spiritual triad. So you've got the 3 cups at the top and the material 4 below. And so when we compare this to how they are on the Tree of Life, because they actually represent the first 7 Sephirot on the Tree of Life, it represents being cut off from the source, the spiritual source, that light, that ocean of life and rebirth and experience. And so it's a material world of which is cut off from its actual origin, its actual purpose. And if water is cut off from its source like that and pulled up into a bucket and just left and never done anything with, what will happen is, of course, it will stagnate and it will start to get algae and all sorts of things in it, because it's cut off and it's not serving a purpose. It's just there for the sake of being there. And so that's really what we can see here, and that's actually why it's quite a simple card really when we have a look at this. It is in fact Venus in Scorpio, and so Scorpio is actually all about that intensity in astrological readings, and we often see it in people of whom would call themselves natural born leaders and things like that. And of course Venus is about love, and you might think, oh, that's quite wonderful, it'd be this intensity of love, and yet Venus is in detriment in Scorpio. And so what this means is simply that this love cannot be expressed purely because we're cut off from that sea, remember? And so instead we're channeling a desire, a search for love, a search for meaning into anything around us, and that's why it's like accumulating physical possessions thinking they're going to bring us something, and it doesn't, and so we search for more and search for more. And so you have that intensity of looking for a type of love in the world, and instead indulging in all manner of various things that are paraded around in front of us in the physical world, and then they of course lead us even further down, and we can become bogged down in all of these different things, and these reactions to the things around us. They can actually affect us quite deeply, and in that way cut us off even further from returning to that source. And so the card itself really does show that symbol. We've seen all throughout the Cups card so far this flowing of water and this pooling of this sea of love and all this, and yet here we see there is firstly a change in colour, and it certainly doesn't seem to be flowing very well. The actual water appears thick and sort of gloopy and not very healthy, and so the petals on the actual flowers are drooping. They don't look healthy, they're spotty, they look diseased, and this represents a poisoning of that water becoming stagnant like we saw. And so it shows perhaps that because the petals, the flowers, aren't being instilled with that life force anymore. And yet we haven't sort of taken these away or tried to bring them back to life in any way. They're still there, and they're still pouring out this poisoned liquid into the seas. And so it's saying there that we're allowing ourselves to become bogged down. We're using our energies almost against ourselves in some way. We're putting that really powerful energy of thought and of that spark of creation into things of which actually affect us negatively. And so it could mean that we're actually working against ourselves by allowing this type of thing to actually continue. And the sky behind the card looks rather dismal, perhaps raining or simply growing with thick clouds threatening a negative turn in the weather. This is a symbol of the build-up of emotions of which are not properly harnessed and not properly expressed. And we've seen this, all of us, I'm sure, in our lives, where people swell up with this intensity of emotion, which could even be the emotion of love, or certainly of hate, or just of frustration, and they can't express it in some way, and so it builds up and up and up, and that's what this sky is saying. It's building up with all of this unspent, unharnessed and unchanneled energy. We're not allowing that energy to flow through us. The rain should come and fall when it falls upon this card, of course, it goes back into the sea and rejoins the light and the harmonious nature of connectedness and all of the wonderful things that come from that. And yet instead it's building up in these clouds, and it's becoming very, very heavy and dark, and one day the heavens will open, so to speak, and all of this will have to come out, and it'll have to come out in some way which could actually harm us if we allow those type of energies and emotions to build up. We simply have to let them flow. And of course that's partly one of the problems with this, because we're still kind of accepting that there's going to be a flow. There is still water, if you like, coming from these petals, but it's poisoned. And this is why Crowley describes this card in the Book of Thoth as being almost suicidal. You're allowing something which will harm you to go into your spiritual sea there at the bottom. And he says that this card essentially represents the sinking into a mire of false pleasure. And so that's how we began, and back with the Rider-Waite card, all of these options of things to try to channel those energies into. And they're never really going to work, because they are things of the world and things of the physical world, of which are illusions. They're here today and they're gone tomorrow. And when they go, we look for a replacement, and we end up drowning in this excess of emotion building up. And that's really what this card is going to mean. It can mean that we are indulging in something in our lives which simply doesn't do us any good. And it could be any matter of things. I know people may think about, smoking and drinking and drugs and things, but it could just be, even if you just sat, say, scrolling through the internet, and then there isn't time to actually do what you wanted to do, and you can't get that time back. And so the card is saying we need to accept, and we need to look at what is in front of us. It's quite obvious from this card that the waters are not in a healthy state. And so it's saying, hold on, there's a time in your life here where we are indulging in something negative. It could be negative moods, it could be destructive coping mechanisms and whatever else it may be. And so we feel like we've lost control perhaps when we get in this card. And yet of course it's not going to be all doom and gloom. Once we've realised that that's what it's like, we can bring ourselves in and reclaim our power, rechannel the energy into something which is going to get us out of this mire of poisoned water. We need to stop looking towards this and look towards the positive instead. Look towards what we want to manifest in our lives. And of course when we do that, we will have to face whatever it is that we are not dealing with, because otherwise we're never going to be able to continue through our journey in the universe and see what is waiting on the other side of the ocean.